Apollo before the Apollo program got its shape, before it was a lunar exploration program. So what NASA did is that after Mercury, they knew that there was going to be a next program, a big next program, and so it was going to be Apollo, but it wasn't necessarily, the destination of Apollo wasn't set. And so that's part of the reason you get this sort of a little bit of a mix match, because Apollo is not the god of the moon. But today it's a very, very fitting, because Artemis is, and also the sister of Apollo. So you get that really wonderful connection between Apollo and Artemis, and also now you get even a closer connection to the moon when it comes to mythology. But this decision to name these spacecraft after mythology comes. There was a NASA engineer who originally came up with the idea. He just happened to be reading a book of mythology, and he proposed Mercury and he proposed Apollo, and that tradition has continued. And interestingly, it's also a tradition taken up in other countries as well, where there are names of mythical figures related to the moon, for instance, that inspire the name of spacecraft and other hardware.
She mentioned Sputnik. You mentioned other countries. I'm curious your impressions of how other countries are watching this accomplishment by the United States, and I'll particularly say China, I suppose, when they're watching these things happen.
Well, what's pretty wonderful is I bet people in China can follow this mission, and that is not true during Apollo 11. So China was one of the few places in the world where people were not getting information about the Apollo 11 mission. More information was actually accessible in Russia, or I should say the Soviet Union. And within the Soviet Union, they actually were able to watch the splashdown live, very interestingly. In China, there were many more limitations on access to information in 1969. Things obviously evolved over time. But I will say one of the great joys this past week of watching all of the NASA YouTube channel streams is that you see all the comments, and you see people saying they're coming from all over the world and they're posting their flags. And so you get this real sense that this is something that's capturing the attention of the world, and people are very enthusiastic. And I think much like during the Apollo era, the sense is that these are humans exploring space, and that they can relate to all of us, and this is something about humankind exploring, as opposed to sort of some of the limitations that come with thinking they're just from another country.
Yeah, and I think the big thing this time, Pedro, is that if you think about the Artemis Accords, and you think about like, oh, the world is watching, much more of the world is involved now. Whether it's the European Space Agency, you've got a Canadian astronaut on board, you've got the Japanese building up lunar base capabilities that they'll be flying in the future. So I think nowadays you have a much bigger international participation with NASA. So people around the world, more of them can relate to what's happening because their countries are playing some role.
And this program is also a program of international cooperation. And that's how we're going to go to the moon in the future, or how we're going to explore Mars, is that it's probably going to be through an international cooperative effort, because it really is best done when it draws from the resources and the expertise of people from around the world. And so here you get this obvious example with Jeremy Hansen, but you also have the service module, which is built by the European Space Agency. And the entire Artemis program is going to have contributions from U.S. partners around the world, which is an exciting element.
We see a helicopter approaching the raft right now, and as we've been told by NASA, they'll be lifted up out of the raft and taken to the ships. Teasel Harmony, you were talking about the differences between harnesses at this point that are being used than in Apollo. Yeah,
so way back in the Mercury era, with the first human spaceflight program, the astronauts it was an individual astronaut, and they were lifted on a harness that's sort of strapped around their body. By the Apollo era, they were lifted in sort of what appeared to be like hammocks, or it's sort of a net, but structured net system, which was standard sort of Navy recovery procedure. So they really drew on the expertise and the talent of the Navy, what the Navy knew how to recover people from ocean situations. And so they used that technology and that expertise and applied it to the Apollo program.
I'm not sure, as I'm watching this picture, that they noodle through all the downwash from that helicopter. So it looks like they're giving them a bit of a ride there as they're kind of hovering over. There's a lot of blowing around there happening. So But yeah, I think there's 2 helicopters, right? 2 crew go on each one of the helicopters. We haven't seen them harness up yet, so we're got to see which technique they're using here.
It looks like I don't know if it looks like someone's holding maybe a cord to the harness. So we may see that in the next few moments as we go on, especially as the recovery effort takes place. As you're watching, let's hear from Anthony in Maryland. Anthony, go ahead.
Hold on. Hi, good evening. First of all, Teasel, Jeff, you guys are doing a fantastic job. This is so exciting.
Anthony, let me pause you a sec. There's the first astronauts to go from the raft as far as the helicopter. Caller, go ahead.
So, first of all, great. Thanks. This is so exciting to watch. Family gather around the TV. We watched the launch. We watched the recovery. Couple questions like things in space. Entertainment-wise, are they listening to like Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon as they circle the moon? I got to imagine they're doing that, right?
They did pick out a lot of different music.
They got
a
playlist.
I think somebody probably would have suggested that, though.
Yeah, so we've heard a lot of information about the wake up music. So this is a long tradition in space flight, and these wake up songs were selected by their friends and family at home, and so I think some of them were playful or personal references led to some of those decisions. But I can tell you, at least during the Apollo era, they brought up cassette tapes. They had their mixtapes made of music they loved, and it's interesting because different crews had different music preferences, and so a lot of country music, as you might imagine, but all sorts of really fun playlists. And you can actually look up the playlist that the different Apollo crews brought up to keep themselves entertained in space. And I really hope we get more information from this crew if they were playing music as they were going around the far side. And, we didn't have communication with them during that point. So it'll be great to learn more.
Again, there's the helicopters as part of the recovery effort as you're seeing it play out. Again, our coverage of this recovery or the return of the Artemis II Orion spacecraft back to Earth. There's another shot that you can look at. Let's hear from John. John in California. John, go ahead.
Well, first, congratulations to NASA, and thank you guys for the great coverage. I'm curious about what the options and alternate plans were today if the weather, because I'm in Northern California, and today we've had some ugly weather go through, thunderstorms and so forth. What if weather had cropped up in that landing zone?
Yeah, we were talking about that before, is that there's not a lot of options at that point. You can't adjust that reentry that much at the last few hours. So I think they could have done things to course correct a day or two ahead. So I think if they were going to make any decision, it would have had to be a little bit earlier in the sequence. Once they got to today, I heard that the weather was nominal at the landing site. I'm like, well, I think they're just coming in no matter what at this point. But I think that's where they would have made some adjustments, would have been like a day or two out if they forecasted anything negative coming in that area.
John in Tyler, Texas, you're next up. Hello.
Hello.
You're on. Go ahead.
John Sage. 2 questions. How far off the coast of San Diego is this splashdown site? And the other is I'm 86, so I've watched everything from, as the other listener said, Sputnik, all the way through all the different missions. And the question is, what is the difference in the diameter of Artemis II and the Apollo?
Okay, John in Texas.
Yeah, so do you remember the Apollo one? So this one's like, 13 feet across, I think, at the bottom. So it's definitely bigger.
Yes, I want to say Apollo, it's between 10 and 11 off the top of my head.
Yeah, so it's definitely bigger. And so your other question was related to how far off the coast, and you were trying to look to see if there's a number. It was not far. When you see the map, you're more than 100 miles off the coast. It looks like they were pretty close by the time they landed.
Yeah, but far enough that they said you wouldn't be able to see the splashdown from land.
Right.
So not terribly close in that sense.
There's go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I'll just say you were curious about the comparison of Artemis and Apollo command modules, and I can tell you at least the internal capacity difference. So I believe Apollo is 210 cubic square feet, and Artemis is 330, I believe.
So what you're seeing is just off the coast of San Diego, where the Orion Integrity splashed down. We showed you pictures from people watching that from the the Air and Space Museum in San Diego. That's where Ryan Thompson was for that watch party. So, Mr. Thompson, what was the reaction and what has it been since the splashdown?
Guys, celebration certainly still continuing, especially as we've seen the crew of Artemis II be lifted off and taken to that Navy carrier for treatment. You know, all the sentiment that you've heard calling into your show over the last few hours, that's been the sentiment in this room. And that initial uneasiness, concern about those risky mission moments of the mission, giving way to just pure jubilation, excitement, and joy watching what has been an amazing feat for NASA. And you mentioned the fact that we are here in San Diego. This location is particular because we're only about 100 or miles or so from where that crew actually splashed down into the Pacific Ocean. There were some people at this watch party who actually ran outside to hear the sonic boom, which was supposedly audible to some people in Southern California just because of the force of the craft entering the atmosphere. This event was supposed to end at 7 o'clock local time, but there are still several hundreds of stragglers here. It's unlikely that they're going to go anywhere anytime soon, especially as this mission is still carrying on into the next hour. Guys.
Ryan Thompson from Spectrum News. Thanks for your coverage. Thanks for taking and telling us about that from San Diego. Thank you. For our guests, I guess now the astronauts are on board. They're heading back to the ship. We talked about this earlier, but next steps. Where do we go from here as far as today is concerned?
Well, yeah, and I was thinking about when Ryan said the sonic boom thing. I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah.
But what's happening like 3 or 4 minutes before they splash down is they're going from supersonic to subsonic. So just like the space shuttle landing at Florida, you're going to hear that sonic boom, and that's going to carry pretty well. So you might not visibly be able to see it, but I don't doubt that some people in San Diego might have heard the sonic boom. And that was right before you saw the parachute deploy. So those drogue chutes come out after you go through your subsonic, and now you can start deploying parachutes. So as we saw that happening, the sonic boom had just happened before that.
So now there are the helicopters heading back towards the USS John P. Murtha. The astronauts on board getting medical examinations once they are on board. Let's watch a little bit of this.
And wheels down. Wheels down of the first helicopter carrying 2 of our Artemis II crew. Pilot Victor Glover and mission specialist Christina Cook. Helo 1 on deck report. Flight deck, 1 carrying the crew, other one of our imagery helicopters. Again, kudos to our imagery and aerial teams for giving us these beautiful views of history in the making. Set amid a gorgeous, soon-to-be sunset here in the Pacific Ocean. Second helicopter. Making its approach of the flight deck. Plenty of people here on the bow with their cell phones out, filming this moment. Some impressive flying here by the Navy, as we are seconds away from wheels down. And there you go. We now have all 4 Artemis II crew members on the USS John P. Murtha. I'm sure they're happy to be out of the water and on this recovery ship with, again, 550 people on board, ready to welcome them home. But first, as we've been saying throughout the broadcast, just making sure the crew feel good. We reported that they were feeling good when they were in Orion, but those were just initial, quick, verbal assessments of how they're feeling. Their destination tonight, the medical bay here on the ship, right after we power down the helicopters here. The team on the flight deck working quickly but methodically. Waiting for just one more helicopter to touch down. Very limited personnel here on the flight deck.
Restricted maneuvering doctrine is in effect.
As that third helicopter touches down.
The ship is at flight quarters. Stand clear of waiter decks, aft of frame 095. Burn no cover stop side. Throw no articles over the side. Hold all trash and garbage on station. Flight quarters.
While just a few folks on the flight deck itself, there are plenty more on some upper decks. I see in some of our views a very packed crowd overhead. Announcements being made over the ship's loudspeaker system, reminding folks to stay clear of operational areas like the flight deck, so that teams can work quickly to get the crew off of the helicopters and into the medical bay. Splashdown today, 5:06 p.m. Pacific time. We are within 2 hours of that splashdown time, and already we have all 4 crew members on the flight deck of the USS John P. Murtha.
There's coverage of the astronauts on board the USS John P. Murtha, Jeff Velosa, things happening at a quicker rate now that it's all done.
Yeah, but it's still, as we're watching this whole evening, right? It's like everything has got to be methodical and by the book, right? So I think for the viewer, it's like, come on, let's get them out, let's see them. And I think even when they were in the capsule, it's like you're waiting, but you don't realize how many people are checking this, checking that, making sure the crew is okay, making sure the capsule's okay. Right now, they're doing a whole bunch of checks again. So from the outside, it's like, come on, let's speed this along. They should be fine. Jump out and just see them. So I think it's exciting to watch, but I think the anticipation is always like, come on, let's go to the next step.
And I suppose there's a sense of relief now that they're on board. Sense of relief they're back on Earth, I suppose, but now they're on board, yeah.
So much relief this evening, yes. And everything we've heard so far is that they're doing really well, and it's just such a great sign. And every time we see them, it's a good confirmation that they're doing really well. So it'll be so exciting when they get off the helicopters, but it's just been good news so far this evening, and I couldn't be happier that's the case.
And we were talking about before, it'd be great to hear from them, but it sounded like NASA's maybe a little like, hey, we'll do a press conference when we're ready. We've got a lot of things, again, we have to go through with them and do it, the initial discussions and everything before they'll let them do a press conference. But I'm hoping that in the next day or so, we start to hear more about seeing the crew and hearing from them.
Viewers, we are expecting a press conference from NASA later on this evening, approximately a half hour now or so. They believe it will feature astronauts, but at least they'll be talking about the concluded Artemis 2 mission as you're watching it play out there on the screen. Our two guests have been talking about it over the last couple hours. When Apollo happened, got to this stage, how much news coverage did it get? But did the world? How long did it take for the world to find out as far as this post after?
So the whole world was watching this live. Huge numbers of people were watching the splashdown, the recovery live. President Nixon was there, as I mentioned before, but hundreds of millions of people were watching this live coverage. And it was the first time the Soviet Union saw the live coverage of a splashdown. So people were captivated. Just like this mission, it took some time to get to the point where you have the astronauts able to speak to the broader public. They were able to take a shower, which I think they were in need of. I imagine these astronauts cannot wait to take a shower after over 9 days in space. And in the Apollo era, they changed into other clothes, and then they were able to speak to President Nixon. He thanked them, and this was broadcast as well. So the entire world found out right away. And I think that it actually brings up a point that I want to commend NASA for in the coverage of the Artemis mission. Is there's this long heritage of being extraordinarily transparent and sharing as much information as possible with the public and with the press. And this was a precedent from the early space age. The United States actually invited press to watch the first attempt at launching a satellite, which didn't go well. It exploded on the launch pad. It was seen as, potentially quite embarrassing, but many people interpreted that as, transparency. This is what happens in an open democratic society. And the U.S. continued to choose that. With additional programs, sharing information when there were accidents or when there were successes. And then this is a part of the program, and I think it helps encourage people to relate to it and to trust it. And it's wonderful to see that there's still so much information available.
Yeah, and I think I've seen this, in Artemis. There's been a big effort whenever there's an anomaly or some issue. They've gotten the experts in front of, NASA brings out their experts. They have the press engage. And finally there is crew coming out of a doorway. Hey, they're sitting in the doorway.
Yep.
So they're moving.
And while they're sitting in the doorway looking at that, let's get another perspective on the day's events. Joining us by Zoom, Matt O'Dowd. He's an astrophysicist. He's with the host of PBS Space Time. Mr. O'Dowd, thanks for your time today.
Hello, it's such a pleasure to be here.
Tell us a little bit about, first of all, PBS Space Time, and then give us your impressions of what you've seen today.
Sure. Well, PBS Space Time is a show about space most of the time. We explore the universe on different levels, astronomy, space travel, but also physics, really trying to capture the beauty of humanity's effort to understand reality.
With that, go ahead.
Well, this was incredible. So I'm an astrophysicist. I think I misread the course syllabus, or at least watching all of this, I kind of wish I was an astronaut, because what these people just achieved and experienced tingles.
What do you believe the experience of the last 10 days or so will teach us about astrophysics?
Yeah, so what it'll do is it'll teach us how to go back to the moon. And going back to the moon will teach us a lot about astrophysics. A ton was learned about the near Earth environment, which was a huge part of the goal of these earlier Artemis flights. And this was the first time that human beings have been beyond the protection of Earth's magnetic field for many decades. And back then we didn't have the sort of sensing and measuring devices that we do now. So we have a huge suite of data on the nature of the radiation out there, on its effect on the human body, that among many other experiments that are going to make going back to the moon much safer. So we learned about the near Earth environment, and when that lets us get boots back on the moon, there's an enormous amount that the moon can teach us, particularly about the formation of the Earth.
When you say that, as far as the future of space exploration by the United States or other countries, where do you think we'll learn about going back to the moon? What do you think it will teach us?
I don't think people realize enough how extraordinary our moon is. In astronomy, we often say that there are two main questions. One is, where did we come from? The other is, are we alone? And the moon can answer both of those questions. We believe it formed in an extraordinary event in which a Mars-sized body smashed into the Earth during the Earth's formation and flung up part of the Earth, which formed the moon. So it's very much a part of the Earth in that sense. But since that happened, it's been kind of frozen, no atmosphere, no tectonics. And it's accumulated a record of everything that's happened in the solar system since it first formed. And so by going back to the moon, understanding what it's made of, understanding the cratering, we can really get this map of the history of the solar system and the formation of the Earth.
From what we've seen of the moon over the last 10 days because of this mission, did anything stand out for you as far as the pictures or other data that came back from it?
They were incredible. The beauty struck me first. The far side of the moon has never been seen by humans until the Apollo missions, and there are parts of the far side of the moon that hadn't been seen until the Artemis 2. It's a rugged place. It's more ancient than the side that faces the Earth, due to reasons that I could get into. But it's heavily cratered. It's quite, it's kind of toothy and ancient, and it potentially holds more secrets.
When it comes to science and the work of physics, Mr. O'Dowd, where do you think that science has to go as far as the questions it has to ask of not only the moon, but our place in it and are eventually going back to it?
So, we want to know how the Earth formed because we want to understand how we ended up here in this universe. But as I said, another big question is, are we alone? And the moon is a rare thing. It's gigantic for a moon. It's the largest compared to the planet in the solar system. And many people think that perhaps the moon was important also in the development of life for a variety of reasons. And understanding, the moon's influence on the Earth could actually teach us about the likelihood of life out there. If moons such as this are rare, life may be rare. If they're common, well, maybe we have neighbors.
We're watching some of the astronauts now leaving the helicopters from the USS John P. Murtha, some walking across towards the medical bay. We're going to continue showing you that as we continue our conversation with Matt O'Dowd. Mr. O'Dowd, when it comes to questions to ask or where the future is when it comes to space exploration, what would you like to see?
It is true that we can do a lot with robots. We've sent robots to Mars that have uncovered incredible things. We can send robots to the moon. There's an advantage to sending humans. We can make quick decisions. There's a long time delay. I mean, it's a couple of seconds for the moon, but it's several minutes for Mars, and even longer. So we can make very quick decisions, scientific decisions, emergency decisions. But I think there's a bigger reason to send people, and why I'm really excited that these sorts of missions are starting up again. And that's just that I guess there's a layer of abstraction between us and the robot on the moon and us and the robot on Mars. But when you know that there's a real human being, much like you and I, perhaps a little more badass, out there experiencing it, then it really brings the universe home, and it unifies us with what's out there. It makes it feel more visceral, more real. I was lucky enough to see Artemis 2 launch, and seeing that thing blast off, seeing that giant rocket sort of rumble and hover on its fire and then shoot off into space, it just made the existence of all of that far more visceral. And I think that's something that these missions bring to all humanity.
Matt O'Dowd with PBS Space Time. Thanks for your input this today.
Thank you.
Let's talk about it, because as we're talking, we're seeing astronauts walking across the deck, and you both were staring intently at it. What's your impressions right now?
Well, this is sort of funny. So I was looking to see. It looks like they might be wearing hats, and of course, everything reminds me of Apollo. But
Right.
this reminded me of Apollo too, because the astronauts got these special hats. The entire crew of the aircraft carrier had them. They had the name USS Hornet. And for Apollo 11, there was this phrase that was adopted in celebration, and it was Hornet +3, which meant that, it was the USS Hornet plus the 3 astronauts that they recovered. But it was a very distinctive design of a hat, and so I was just checking because it looks like maybe they're wearing something similar. So it'd be really exciting if that's the
their hair
case.
in 9 days. Maybe it was, yeah.
But they seem to be doing really well, and I only got 3 of them coming out, but it was great to see them doing so well.
And one was clapping. It seems like the good spirits. And I imagine after an ordeal like this, that's amazing to see.
Yeah, they did have people around them. It seemed like just in case, right? But they all seem to be doing really well coming off. So, hey, and to go back to what your guest, Mr. Dowd, was talking about too, about what is the moon going to tell us? And now when we go back more often, what are we going to learn? I think the most interesting thing is right now, you asked about China before. There's a Chinese robotic mission rolling to the launch pad to go to the South Pole of the moon. And so what's going to happen is it's going to be very interesting. Partnerships of countries from around the world are all going to the same location, South Pole of the moon, to try to do some exploration. So I don't know how crowded it's going to get. I guess there's plenty of room for everybody. But I think we're all now focused on one part of the moon to do our exploring, set up our human outposts. So hopefully that leads to some cooperation among different countries, right? Because as soon as you're both establishing human outposts at the same locations, more or less, are there safety regulations put in place, right? There was agreements with the Soviet Union about if there's stranded astronauts, could one crew pick up another crew? Is that feasible? Would there be agreements between countries? So the South Pole of the moon could be another place where we have to have treaties and organizations where we discuss the pressure inside a habitat, and is it going to be common so that a Chinese crew member who's stranded could go to a U.S. outpost and get inside, right? I think a lot of that's going to happen because we all are going to the same place.
What is it about the south side or south?
It's that water ice that we think is there. We have no super definitive proof, but every orbiter, everything we've done says that if you look at the bottom of the moon, there is a big dent in the moon. And we think that dent was put there potentially by asteroids and comets that hit it in the early formation after it was formed. There's other reasons why water ice might have gotten to the South Pole, but that's one of them. And so there's the potential that there are buried comets. NASA spends a lot of money to go to a comet to bring back a little sample, right? Can imagine if there's actual comets buried at the bottom of the moon and have a lot of water ice in them. People will talk about, oh, we could turn it into rocket fuel. Oh, we could turn it into drinking water and oxygen for the crew. And I'm like, yeah, and you could study that because that's some primordial material from the early solar system embedded with ice. Who knows what's living in there, right? So, or could have lived in there. So I think the excitement is going to be scientifically go to the South Pole. And that's why all the countries want to go. It's the science of it, and then it's the exploitation of a resource, common human feature, right? If you could find a resource, why not use it for something with the thought that if you could create rocket fuel or other things, maybe it helps you go to Mars or do some other things.
Let's go to Nathan. Nathan in California. Hi there.
Hi, I'm Nathan Yo. You guys are doing a great job. I just have 2 questions. I was wondering how the spacecraft got through the space junk, and also I was wondering when the spacecraft was going down for the splashdown. I was wondering if it felt like the astronauts were going down a roller coaster.
So I'll do. So the space junk part, that's a really good question because maybe during Apollo there just wasn't so many things in space, period. Now we do have to worry about that all from when they come towards the Earth, that last hour or 2 that they were coming in, they are passing through a fair amount of orbits where there are other satellites. So before the launch, they do a lot of analysis we track a lot of the space junk and active satellites. So they do a lot of analysis of the incoming trajectory to know that it's nowhere near anything that could damage the spacecraft. Now, that doesn't say that something might not happen, right? So the best we can do is just try to analyze it ahead of time, use all the tracking data we have available that we know where stuff is in space, and then best we can make sure that we're not in any kind of corridor of space where there could be junk in the way.
And I'll say the roller coaster, that's a great analogy. It does probably feel a lot like a roller coaster, except much more intense. But yes, that is part of the experience. And then that, when you have a roller coaster, you get the relief of feeling just a normal amount of forces
before,
again.
What was it, like 3G or 4G, something like that?
3.9G is what they anticipated for this mission, and two different phases.
Okay, and
so the initial drop and then the second drop.
Oh, and is that roller coaster-ish? I'm going to guess that is roller coaster-ish.
Yeah.
So yeah. So compared to those Apollo missions, this is more like a roller coaster ride.
A little lighter, a little gentler.
Yeah.
A little gentler will also be the press conference that's upcoming in the next couple of minutes. That's the shot that you'll see Johnson Space Center, the press conference following the conclusion of this mission. Again, stay on C-SPAN to watch that play out as our guests talk about various aspects of the mission now that it's concluded. Let's go to Caleb. Caleb in South Carolina, you're next up. Hello.
Hello. Yeah. So I actually have 3 questions. So the first one is, what happens to the capsule or the service module after the capsule detaches from it, and what happens to it after splashdown? The second one is, what happened to the first Artemis 1's capsule? And then the final one is, will Artemis 2's capsule go into a museum?
So as far as the service module, I'll do that part. So the service module definitely burns up in the atmosphere. So it has no heat shield. It's not meant to be reused. And so the goal, like many satellites, when a satellite in Earth orbit gets old, we'll put it back through the atmosphere and it'll burn up. We've designed it to burn up in the atmosphere so that nothing hits. You have to actually do an analysis of the probability of hitting somebody on the head with a piece of debris from your satellite. And you have to make sure you've designed it so that there's no risk to human life. And so same thing happened with the service module. It was specifically made to just be disposed of at the end of the mission and not be recovered. So that's that part. I don't know if you know about the capsule part for...
Artemis 1 is still at NASA, and they wanted to make sure that they maintained it so that they could continue to study the heat shield. And I think they'll probably do some comparative analysis between Artemis 2 and Artemis 1. So more lessons to be learned from that spacecraft. But eventually, I would guess that both Artemis 1 and Artemis 2 will end up in museums.
Will they be Smithsonian-based museums or private museums?
Or he's lost to write a proposal.
Yeah,
she was saying, so
we'd have to write a really good proposal. But what's really exciting with this Artemis program is there's plans for so many missions, and so there'll be, like Apollo, many spacecraft. So many museums will have the opportunity to exhibit these spacecraft. So I have mentioned before that as the Apollo curator at the Smithsonian collected all of the Apollo spacecraft. But besides one of them, they're all on loan to other institutions across the country. So it was fun to see in San Diego, there's an Apollo spacecraft there, but they're scattered throughout the country. So no matter where you are, you can see which one's closest to you. And I imagine the same will be true of the Artemis program. So these spacecraft likely will go on exhibit throughout the country.
Well, I like what you said before, that it could be even like the parachutes or other stuff, the suits that they wore, the orange suits. A lot of those could end up in museums too. Yeah.
I'd be curious if Rise ends up in a museum.
Right.
I've really enjoyed seeing Rise throughout the mission. It's so playful, such a happy face, that zero-G indicator. And I know some of them have ended up in museums. I was just looking at one at the Smithsonian. There's one of Smokey the Bear from a previous mission. So hopefully that'll end up somewhere because it's such a charming part of this mission.
Marcus in Maryland, hello.
Hey, how are you? Hi, I'd like to first thank you for the amazing broadcast of this historic event. And I'd like to start by saying that I work here at the United States Navy Test Pilot School at Pax River, and it's our great honor to have a graduate of our school be the commander of this incredible mission. And we feel so incredibly lucky to be part of the journey of so many astronauts. And I've actually got 2 questions for you guys. First off, when we were watching the re-entry through the thermal camera, you can see that the capsule is incredibly hot. What is the time frame it takes for that to cool down to where they're actually able to handle it? And then the second one, when you're watching the parachutes open and everything, you still have the incredible heat coming up from the capsule. What kind of rigging are they using to hold the parachutes so it doesn't fail because of the heat?
Yeah. Well, so I think the first good thing is the theme tonight is Go Navy. So we appreciate all the Navy folks that have called in. So that's great. So when it comes to the heat dissipation, that's exactly, we were talking about when it landed, it took 20, 30 minutes at least before they got close to it. They were waiting for it to cool down. And because it has its own thrusters, there's the potential that some of the hydrazine fuel, which is very toxic, that was in there could have leaked out. I mean, low probability, but I think they were waiting for that as well. So that's why you saw that first boat approach maybe 20 minutes after splashdown. Yeah, they're waiting for it to cool, waiting to come in. And we talked about they do some kind of like a sniff test or something where they check the air and the water to make sure there's nothing toxic and that the temperature is down low enough where they can do a closer approach. So it does take a while to cool off. And we were talking about that thermal camera that you saw during reentry. Yeah, that looked like you were seeing even during that last phase of reentry where they were having gases and smoke coming off it. Smoke visible in an infrared camera, not maybe visible smoke, but showing how much heat was still built up in that heat shield. So, yeah, and I don't know about the rigging. I'm not sure if you knew anything about the how they.
I love that question, and now I want to find the answer, but I don't know it off the top of my head. But I will point out that we often talk about the heat shield gets up to 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit, which it does, but it's during that 6-minute blackout period during the initial reentry into the Earth's atmosphere. And if you recall, the entire reentry is 13 minutes. And so from that, after that 6-minute mark, as it's slowing down, it's cooling off quite a lot. So just a little, extra detail that's useful. And also with the ablative heat shield, the part of the way that it's designed is to sort of move the heat away from the spacecraft. So it's charring as it's going through the atmosphere. And what that's doing is taking the massive amount of heat that's being affecting the heat shield, and it's charring away and stripping it away and moving it away from the heat shield. So that's part of, I didn't explain it that well, but that's part of the design. So the way that they have designed this heat shield is to ensure that the heat is being removed from the spacecraft as quickly as possible, and that's that ablative heat shield approach.
We are expecting that press conference from NASA to take place around 10:35. Again, stay with C-SPAN for the start of that. Let's go to Steve in Wisconsin. Hi.
Hi. I'm going to just congratulate you guys on the great coverage. I have a couple questions. What does it feel like in the module as they're going through the atmosphere? I know they say it feels pretty rough on the way up. Is it really rough on the way down? And also, I was wondering as far as the Apollo astronauts, the living ones, do you have much contact with them anymore? That's probably for Miss Harmony.
Let's start there.
Sure. I do. It's such a privilege. I have felt so lucky to be able to do quite a lot with the Apollo astronauts. So sometimes we do programs with them. I reach out to them. One of my colleagues is discussing astronaut training for lunar geology with one of them. So yes, we engage with them as much as possible. They're really an incredible resource. So it's been an absolute privilege. I really, really enjoyed getting to work with Michael Collins from Apollo 11. Well, he was still alive, a great contributor to the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum. He was the director of the museum when it opened in 1976 and remained really engaged with the museum, donated a lot of his personal collection, but was really active and in the outreach throughout his lifetime, even after he left the museum. And Jim Lovell also did quite a lot with us. I had a very fun Apollo 13 50th anniversary event with Jim Lovell because, of course, the Apollo 13 anniversary, if you know the mission, it was the successful failure mission. And the anniversary just so happened to be at the beginning of COVID. And so all of the celebrations had to be moved online. And he joked about how this was just so fitting for his mission, a great sense of humor. And this was the beginning, so we rigged up some kind of virtual thing with his phone. And he was a great sport in his 90s at the time, but really still, making a priority of telling the story of Apollo, sharing those stories with the broader public, and being engaged with the Smithsonian and other museums across the country.
And as far as the bouncy ride, I think that the Artemis crew said that the entry would be about the same bouncy ride that they had on the way up. So you might not have a rocket below you, but the atmosphere buffeting against you is giving you that same kind of, and the G-forces are similar. So yeah, same kind of ride.
Jana in Pennsylvania, go ahead.
Hi, everybody. I just wanted to also say go Navy. My dad is a Navy vet, Donald Kernicle. Lastly, my question is, my son told me there was a dog sent to space by the Soviets, I think in the 50s. Thinking about the future and possibly having a space society up there, do we think that the United States is going to send a dog back into space? And lastly, I just want to say hi to my son Landon and my nieces Zoe and Allie and my nephew Owen.
I like this idea of pets in space. That's really fun. Some of the astronauts have gone up with animals, but it's usually for experiments. So like fish, or there were spiders on Skylab because they wanted to see whether or not spiders would weave webs the same in space as they did on planet Earth. In the early days, NASA and the Soviet Union sent up animals. This was a way to ensure that spaceflight would be safe for humans, and so the Soviet Union really focused on sending dogs into space. The U.S. sent chimps, and there were other animals that got to travel in space as well. So there were turtles and flies and all sorts of things. But I don't think there's actually been a pet yet. So that's an interesting idea for future missions.
But so that first dog flew in 1957. He was the Soviets' second successful launch to get something into orbit. That dog, Laika, did not return safely to Earth. Future dogs and future chimps and others did make it safely back to Earth. So, but that is, yeah, I do like that idea as well. But I think on the moon, I'm going to imagine robot pets. So like little robot dogs, maybe. So maybe that's a starting point. So.
The cat people are probably protesting with that. But Alan in Oregon, we're running a little short on time, but go ahead.
Okay, two quick questions. They keep showing the video of the splashdown with the parachutes, and my question is actually about the parachutes. In case something happens to the parachutes, the drag chutes and the main chutes, what would be plan B and what would be plan C? Second question is the velocity upon splashdown, plan A, or the velocity of splashdown for plans B and C? Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know, and maybe you've heard, I know Apollo, you said there was one where not all three deployed. They do design it so that 2 deployed chutes at the end should be safe to bring it down. Now, 20 miles an hour is what they land at on a normal 3 parachute. I'm not sure how that changes if you only have 2 full ones. I think they're still trying to limit it because you can't get that too high or the shock to the crew would be too big. So, but I know you had talked about that on Apollo. It didn't always have 3 chutes.
Yeah, there was one Apollo mission that came down with 2 chutes, but it actually didn't increase the speed all that much, surprisingly. So I believe they came in at 22 miles per hour as opposed to around 20. So it's a relatively close, relatively comfortable ride. There are, with the Apollo spacecraft at least, there were a few things built into the design of the command module to help lessen the effects of the impact on the crew. So there were these crushable ribs inside the spacecraft, about 4 inches thick. So those compressed at splashdown, and then the astronaut seats were somewhat suspended, and so that also acted as a shock absorber.
But it is a really good point that, when we're watching them, it's the same moment as launch where you're worried about that rocket safely doing its job. Those parachutes have to do their job. There's just no way that capsule survives if parachutes don't deploy.
We only have a few minutes left, so let me ask you this. Sum up the last 10 days. The standouts for you.
Goodness, that is so hard.
I know it's wrong to do it.
I feel like the last 10 days have been so overwhelming in a really good way, and then I'll have more of an answer to this as I process it all. But it's just, it is so exciting when something that seems unbelievable, like how is this going to happen? This is such a challenge. It's going to be, there's so many things that need to be pulled off, and it goes so extremely well. It's a bit overwhelming. Michael Collins, who was the Apollo 11 command module pilot, would talk about his mission as a series of daisy chains that had to hold together. And that's really true when it comes to spaceflight. That's step after step after step that has to work out well. And so all the planning that's required, all the teamwork that's required is really on show. And so it's magnificent. I'm a historian of science and technology, and there's someone in my field that talks about the technological sublime, and you really get the sense of it with this mission. It does feel sublime in a way, and I'm sure in a little bit of time I'll have more to say about it, but I'm experiencing it. You know, it's just
got about
thrilling.
a minute, yeah.
Yeah. So from my side, extreme pride, right? The NASA people that made this happen, just some incredible human beings. I've had privilege to work with some of them, but boy, what an incredible team effort to make this happen. Personally, as that little dorky kid that was watching Apollo missions, did I ever think I'd be on C-SPAN watching Apollo next version coming back from the moon? No way. So this has been a great privilege to even play a small role in kind of working with your audience and talking about these questions and learning from Teasel more about Apollo that I didn't know as a little kid, right? Like you saw it from a different perspective. So I really appreciate the opportunity.
Well, it's incredible people all around. You two joining us for this show, not only the previous show that we had. Thank you. Let me, before you let you go, that was Jeff Velosin, Capital Technology University. He has spent several years with NASA as well. And Teasel Muir-Harmony of Natural Air and Space Museum. She's their Apollo collection. Don't forget, everybody, that the last several 10 days of Artemis has been recorded by us, C-SPAN. And if you're interested in finding out from press conferences to the initial blast off to the days in space, the various reactions of the crew, you can always go to our two sources for that if you want. You could go to our website at cspan.org, and you can also follow along on the app as well if you are interested in finding out more and learning more about the previous days of Artemis. As well as you can find out more things that we've taken in on space exploration altogether, from Apollo to Mercury. The Book TV unit on our C-SPAN 2 sites have done an incredible job over the last couple of months with documentaries and special programs taking a look of the nature of space exploration, especially in light of the Artemis mission. And if you're interested in seeing that, again, the main website is cspan.org, and you can always go to our Book TV unit as well to find out more there. On top of all that, we want to thank Matt Fitzpatrick, Ivan Porras for their portion and their contribution to this program. Again, that space news conference from NASA on the conclusion of the Artemis II conference will start momentarily. And as we wait for the conference, let me ask you this. I know we concluded it, but let me ask you this. As far as things you want to learn about from NASA officials, what would you like to learn from them as they do this?
I want to learn about those riggings now. I love that question from the caller. I think that is like such a great point. What do you do with all the heat and the heat shield and its effect on those parachutes? So I hope they answer that question, and if not, I'm going to look it up.
Mr. Velosin.
I'm just hoping that they give us a little bit more insight into what we were not able to hear and see during that whole recovery operation, right? So I was kind of hoping we'd see inside the capsule. We'd hear more of the crew talking to the recovery team. So I'm hoping we get a little bit more insight. I know we hear it was perfect as a trajectory, but let's hear about what exactly was going on.
Let's exactly hear from it. We'll take you to that press conference right now.
3 good main shoots.
And brought them home. Good evening and welcome to NASA's Johnson Space Center in Houston. I'm Rachel Kraft with NASA Communications. Several leaders to talk about the successful mission. They are Dr. Lori Glaze, head of the Artemis programs, Rick Henfling, entry flight director, Howard Hugh, Orion program manager, and Sean Quinn, exploration ground systems program manager. We'll hear briefly from them and then take questions from here in the room and on the phone. And with that, we'll start with Amit.
Good evening. Yesterday when we were in this room, we told you that the crew would put their lives behind our confidence, and they did. Yesterday in this room, we told you that today belongs to the engineers and technicians who touched this machine, and it does, and their work was good. Welders at Michoud shaped the heat shield and joined the rocket. Technicians at Kennedy packed parachutes, stacked the vehicle, stacked Orion, stacked SLS. Engineers in Bremen, Torino, and across the Alliance built a service module. Workers at Utah cast the boosters. Teams at Stennis fired the engines. Flight controllers in this building in Houston sat console for 10 days straight and sat silent in the night for 6 minutes while plasma took the signal. Navy divers pulled the crew out of the Pacific in an incredible way. The vehicle spoke for all of them. And at 25,000 feet per second, it said the work was good. As we say in our business, physics votes last. The families of the crew said this week there had been happiness and joy, but also anxiety, wanting to get their loved ones home safely. I was with them tonight. 4 families sat through those 6 minutes, and their courage is the same as the crew that just came home. Yesterday, Flight Director Jeff Radigan said we had less than a degree of an angle to hit after 250,000 miles to the moon. And their team hit it. That is not luck. That is 1,000 people doing their jobs. You all heard the crew's words during the mission. They were incredibly inspirational. They carried the torch from Apollo through station and around the far side of the moon. Their words belong to them. We'll get to hear from them as soon as they're back here. But tonight belongs to the team that built the machine that they wrote. We talk a lot about what gets in our way. The impediment to action is where we find the way to get to action. What stands in the way becomes the way. This program faced every obstacle an institution could face. The team met each one with work, and tonight is the proof. But that work needs to continue. The path to the lunar surface is open, but the work ahead is greater than the work behind us. It always will be. 53 years ago, humanity left the moon. This time we return to stay. Let us finish what they started. Let us focus on what was left undone. Let us not go to plant flags and leave, but to stay. With firmness in our purpose, with gratitude for the hands who built the machines, and with love for the ones that we carry with us. Welcome home, integrity. I'll hand it over to Dr. Glaze.
Thank you so much, Amit. So y'all, we did it. We sent 4 amazing people to the moon and safely returned them to Earth for the first time in more than 50 years. To the generation that now knows what we're capable of, welcome to our moonshot. I want to thank our entire team across this nation and around the world who gave every ounce of ingenuity and effort to make. I am so proud of each and every one of you, what you have achieved over the last 10 days. NASA has shown that ambitious goals are worth pursuing and can inspire the world. We are so thrilled to have Reed, Victor, Christina, and Jeremy back here on Earth and safely aboard the USS John P. Murtha. Our team is fired up, and this mission, as we've been talking about, is just the beginning. To all of our new followers out there, please stay tuned. This is the first mission, our first mission to the moon, of many more to come. And we can't wait. Our teams are so ready to get to work on the next missions and explore the lunar surface and bring the world along with us. I'll pass it over to Rick.
Thank you, Lori. Thank you all for your continued interest in this mission. What a truly spectacular day it was for NASA and all of our international partners. This crew has said time and again that they were going for all of humanity, and today we fulfilled that objective by completing their journey and returning them safely to Earth. I've got a few stats for those who are interested, courtesy of the Flight Dynamics Officer in Mission Control. Integrity and her crew of 4 astronauts flew 700,237 miles. We reached a peak velocity of 24,664 miles per hour. We hit our flight path angle target within 0.4%. We flew an entry range of 1,957 miles, and we landed within less than a mile of our target. What a tremendous day. Over to Howard.
Thank you, Rick, and thank you to the flight control team. What an outstanding job. Wow, what a fantastic day. I mean, we've dreamed as a team of reaching this day, and appreciate Amit's comments. I mean, so many people have worked very hard, tirelessly to get this day. I think this mission has been historic and has demonstrated new capabilities for Orion spacecraft, has taken our crew farther than any crews that have ever gone to the moon and back safely. 252,756 miles. And that is a fantastic feat. We got a lot more to do. And I'm so happy that we get to have this moment, but we're going to have a lot of these moments coming up. And I want to thank the entire Orion team. They have worked tirelessly. They've dedicated many hours. They've committed to excellence and innovated and attacked challenges that we've come up with for both our NASA team, our industry partners, and our European team as well. We did it together. We brought the crew home safely. They deserve a round of applause. It was a terrific day for them as well. And I want to thank the crew. They have been a fantastic inspiration to our teams as well. You've heard their messages. We are so happy they're back on the ground. We can't wait to see them as well. And finally, we've learned a lot from this mission. Number one was bringing the crews home safely, but it's also a test flight. And like Amit said, we have work ahead of us to be done. We're going to learn from this mission. We're going to look at the data, and we're going to move forward. This is the start of a new era of human space exploration. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Howard. What an incredible end to an incredible mission. I got to tell you, I think I'm trying to pick out the best thing that happened today, and I'll just say that we were sitting in the back room getting ready for this press conference, and Howard gets a call from Reed Weissman, the commander of Integrity, and it was so great to hear his voice and tell us that all the crew is okay, and we can say that we did our mission. We accomplished what we set out to do. I'm very proud of the efforts of the Exploration Ground Systems team that supported both the launch and recovery operations alongside our Navy partners. All the hard work and dedication over the last couple years paid off today, and the team did a great job. Our recovery teams are currently in the process of bringing Orion back on the well deck of the ship, and hopefully within about 4 or 5 hours it'll be hard down in the back end of the USS Mirtha. It's good to be NASA. It's good to be an American today. Thank you.
All right, it's time now for questions. We'll start here in the room and take several from the phone. For those on the phone, you can press *1 to get into the question queue, and please limit to one question if you can. We'll start here with Joey.
Thanks so much. Joey Rillett with Reuters, and congrats on a really nice mission. Curious to hear more about how the astronauts are doing, where are they going to sleep tonight, and then also, when do you guys expect to announce the crew for Artemis 3? Thanks.
So the answer to your second question, Joey, is soon. I will not put units on that value, but soon. Rick, you want to talk about the crew, what they're doing?
Yeah, we saw the crew a number of times after they got out of the spacecraft. We saw them on the front porch. Everybody was happy and healthy. I saw Victor as he was sitting on the edge of the helicopter on the flight deck of the ship, and he was smiling and in good spirits. And everything we've been hearing from the surgeons is the flight crew is happy and healthy and ready to come home to Houston.
Hi, Lauren Grush with Bloomberg. Congratulations again. Obviously, it's been such a great mission to watch from start to finish, but I guess I'm wondering if you had to categorize, this was a test flight. What would you say is the issue that you feel maybe the most grateful arose during this mission so that you could apply that lesson learned to the next?
Maybe
like me,
Howard, why don't you take that one?
Yeah, I think we're taking a lot of lessons learned. Certainly, learning about how the crew operates a spaceship has been a really great learning experience, and flying and ability for them to test drive for our spacecraft has been good. I think, as we mentioned previously, our pressure control assembly, where we discovered a leakage through the system. I think we learned a lot about that. That is a new finding. Certainly, we're going to go investigate that. We're going to look at that and move forward to make sure that we make some changes if necessary, but we'll get to all the data and we'll go forward from there.
Marcia.
Associated Press, Marcia Dunn. The administrator described the crew as great communicators, almost poets. How is, this is going to be a tough act to follow for the upcoming crews soon to be picked. Talk about this crew in particular and what they brought to this that went beyond the scientific and the research and the engineering, please.
I'll just say that this particular crew, they've gotten to know each other so well. So each of them individually are just absolutely amazing individuals. But they, as a group, you could watch them, and what they brought as you watch them in Orion over the last 10 days, operating just seamlessly between the four of them, just the teamwork, the camaraderie, I think they really brought an amazing sense of what we're trying to achieve with this mission. It's the mission for all humanity, a mission for all, and they really did represent that and tried to communicate that. I do know that our entire astronaut corps is spectacular, and so I have no doubt that the next teams will also rise to that level.
Jackie.
Hi, all. Jackie Waddle, CNN. Congratulations. Question for Rick. I'm really anxious to hear what that blackout during reentry was like for you. And also just wanted to ask, that splashdown target being less than a mile off is incredible. Can you walk us through if anything, was outside of ordinary? I know we heard on comms there were some sensor issues just before entry interface. Just curious to hear more about that. Thanks.
Sure. So, blackout, there's really no beating around the bush with that. It's a difficult time because the flight control team wants to see data. We want to look at the data. We want to be able to provide input to the flight crew on how to fly their spaceship. And when we don't have data, we're trying to figure out what to do with ourselves. But we knew when blackout was going to start. It started when we expected. We knew when it was going to end. It ended when we expected. And so that gave us the trust that the spaceship was flying itself correctly. As far as some of the cautions and things that came up on the way down, the prop cautions, they were, we think that, again, that was learning of the spacecraft. Some of the limits are set a little bit tighter than we probably should have had them set, and we dispositioned those and moved on. As far as the comms post-landing, we don't quite know what was going on there, but we worked around it. We had comms with the recovery team, and we safely handed over the mission authority at the right time.
Okay, Josh.
Hi, Josh Denner, space.com. Really excited to hear that the crew is doing well. I'm interested, we saw Victor sitting on the edge of that helicopter once they landed on the ship, and it was great to see them all, walk across the deck. They were set to do an emergency egress test with a ladder, a backpack, I'm wondering if they've performed that yet, how soon they will be performing it, and if they have, how it went.
I'm not familiar with an emergency egress test post-landing. Given that this was a test mission, the number one goal was to get the flight crew out of the spaceship as fast as we could, and we weren't looking at any post-landing objectives.
Yeah, we did do, I think, back when we were back on the launch pad, we did, during the CDDT, we did an emergency egress, but that's the only one I'm aware of that. Yeah, but we'll check on it for you.
Eric.
Eric Berger, Ars Technica. Congratulations on making what I know is really hard look easy. It was a beautiful mission. Amit, you said the work ahead is greater than the work behind us. Can you talk about, as sort of NASA rises to these far greater challenges in Artemis 3, Artemis 4, and building the moon base, how important it is for you and the agency to be flying humans in deep space again and sort of to be at an operational cadence? This has to be pretty uplifting to the workforce to put the 50 years of not being back to the moon behind us.
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, flight cadence and iteration is the key to reliability and safety. We were waiting to fly this mission for several years. A lot of that was because of the issues we saw during Artemis 1 and making sure we did that the right way, and we tried to make sure the machine was perfect before we flew it. But the real way to do that is to keep iterating, to keep flying, keep learning, keep getting data in the flight environment. So that piece of how we've changed the architecture and demanding that higher cadence is going to be, I would say, mandatory for us to be successful. We need that muscle memory to exist. We need the data to keep coming in, and we need to be able to quickly iterate and change the machine as we learn from it. Everything we learned from Artemis 2, we're going to get right after it, but I would say it's essential.
Okay, Irene.
Irene Klotz with Aviation Week in Space Technology for Amit. What do you think will be your biggest challenge to ensure that this mantle and responsibility of inheriting what Apollo did does not end like Apollo?
I think we've talked about this a little bit before. You know, what the architects of Apollo, Gilruth, von Braun, Siemens, Mueller, what they really wanted to do when they were given the challenge of expanding the range of action to the moon was to learn to live and work in space for a long time. They wanted to do that first. I talked a little bit about this with Rob earlier. I think, you know, and of course, because of the nature of the environment they were in, you know, they were in a race. They achieved their objectives, their geopolitical as well as technological. But once it was done, it was done. And I think the foundation they wanted to build on is what we went to afterwards. So we wanted to, you know, investigate reusability with shuttle. We did that. We wanted to learn to live in space for a long time with station. We've got to that point now, 25 years of occupation. And now it's interesting. I think where we are with the program is kind of where they wanted us to be before they decided to go do that, to actually enable a sustainable presence, to learn how to live and work there for a long time. So, you know, it's a weird irony of history that, you know, it took that long for us to do that, but we weren't sitting idle while that happened. We developed the capability to have an enduring presence, you know, in space, and now we're going to take advantage of that now that we've reached back to the moon.
Okay, we'll take one more in the room from Ken Chang, and then we'll go take several from the phone.
Hi, Ken Chang from New York Times. I guess for Rick and everybody else, can you talk about what the last 13 minutes were like? There had to have been some anxiety, and what was the moment where you could finally relax, and when did you start celebrating in Mission Control?
Well, certainly there's anxiety. If you didn't have anxiety bringing this spacecraft home, you probably didn't have a pulse. You know, I have a lot of trust in my team. We've got all flight controllers in the room on entry day went through a rigorous training process, and they are the system experts on their respective part of the spacecraft. And so while there's anxiety, there's a lot of confidence because the team is there to do a job, and we've trained well, and we executed well. We all breathed a sigh of relief once the side hatch opened up. That's when we brought the team in. We said a few words with the flight controllers. And then we turned around to the families and waved to the families and gave them a thumbs up. And we all watched as a flight control team as each of the 4 astronauts got out of the spaceship and were hoisted up onto the helicopters. It was a great day.
Okay, we'll take several questions from the phone now. The first one is from Micah Maidenberg with the Wall Street Journal.
Hey, good evening. Question for Lori or Howard. I know it's very, very early here, but any initial thinking about the heat shield performance relative to Artemis 1? And could you walk through how the heat shield will be assessed in the coming weeks and months? Thanks so much.
So I'll just start, and then I'll hand it over to Howard. How's that? So, you know, initially we gathered a lot of data already. Certainly you saw there were aircraft that were positioned in order to do some imagery and collect data. So we've got some of those data that can be analyzed in the coming days and weeks. We also had divers below the surface that took imaging of the heat shield before it was brought onto the Mertha, so that we could understand exactly what state it's in after it landed. And so I think we've already begun the data gathering piece of it. I'm sure there'll be more assessments once we get on the ship. And then Howard, why don't you talk kind of what the next steps are?
Yeah, we already have 2 of our heat shield experts on board the ship, and so when we get the crew module into the well deck, and we'll do some inspections right off the bat. Like Lori said, we've got underwater divers that are taking pictures, and then after that, once we've inspected that on the ship, we'll transfer back to Kennedy Space Center. We'll have opportunity to look in detail and do scans of the heat shield, and we have a lot of good data from that. We also captured a lot of great imagery. Obviously, we haven't had time to digest all that data, but we will in the next several days and make sure we understand if there's anything that happened that was anomalous. But we're very excited. The team is very excited to get that data from both the imagery and seeing it live in person.
Next up is Jackie Mogensen with Scientific American.
Hi, thanks for this. I wanted to follow up on one of the earlier questions about the astronauts. I was curious if it might be possible to tell us a little bit more if we know about what the astronauts will be doing in their first days back on Earth, you know, what their first meal might be or activities with their families. Thanks so much.
Well, the top priority is going to be to get them promptly back to their families here in Houston. As far as the specifics, I'm sure each of the crew members has something special planned with their families, and that'll be the priority, is for them to take some time and spend with their loved ones.
Yeah, I'm not sure we answered it, but we do anticipate them arriving back here in Houston 12 to 24 hours after splashdown, so that would be between 7 in the morning and 7 in the evening tomorrow.
Next on the phone is Jeff Faust with Space News.
Good evening. I wonder if you can talk through what the processing of the Orion spacecraft is going to be now that it's back. What point do you sort of extract all of the lessons learned from the mission and start applying them to Artemis 3 in order to have that mission ready to go launch in about a year's time? Thanks.
Yeah, we will have what we call quick initial 30-day report that we will put together. Every team will be doing their due diligence and analyzing all the data we have. The crew module will get transported back to Kennedy Space Center. Sean's team, Exploration Ground Systems, is going to decontaminate the vehicle in terms of the propulsion system has hydrazine, and so we'll be working through that. In the meantime, we'll be pulling hardware off the boat in parallel with other activities, and when we get back to Kennedy Space Center, we've got about 286 components we're going to reuse in future missions already, and then we're going to look at other components and determine if we can reuse those as well. A lot of work, not only on the hardware flow, but also all the analysis of the data we're going to need going forward to learn from this mission and carry forward for Artemis 3 and beyond.
Okay, we'll take one more from the phone and then come back here into the room. The next question is from Richard Trudeau with Orlando Sentinel.
Hi, thanks again for taking the time. This is another question for Howard. For Artemis 3, is the docking system that you have to do with Blue Origin and/or SpaceX, is that at what point would that system be sort of in place on the new capsule? And I guess for Amit, how are your two contractors progressing toward having something that's going to actually go up there on your timeline? Thanks.
Okay, I'll start with our docking system. Our docking system is ready to go. It's already been qualified. We've already got the flight unit at Kennedy Space Center. Later this summer, we'll integrate it on top of the crew module. And we've done a lot of testing already, so the final part is actually the mechanical mating of the docking hatch and the docking mechanism itself. And so we have a standard way of doing dockings in space that we expect Blue Origin and SpaceX to work with us on and accomplish that mission.
Yeah, and as far as the other part, I think we're in a massive test campaign. We've got a huge test coming up of the Blue Origin Mark 1 lander, which will be the kind of smaller version of the lander they want to use to attempt the landing missions. There's going to be a test flight of that this year. We also have the test of the Block 3 Starship and Super Heavy, which is coming up hopefully in a few weeks here. So, every day in this program, we're going to be testing big machines, and we're just going to keep getting side by side with them to help them make progress.
Okay, Jackie, and then we'll come back to the other side of the room.
Thank you, Jackie Goddard for the Times of London. My question is for Howard. As a little boy, you were inspired by Star Wars. I wondered if today is better for you than Star Wars, and for future space travelers looking back at today, what should they see as being the significance? Thank you.
Wow, you might be watching my old interviews or something, but I would say 1,000, I don't know what the number is, thousands of times better. I would say that I shared a moment with my father. He took me to see Star Wars. He's not alive today. I wish he was, because that little kid who saw and was inspired by the stars, and now we're able to send our crew out to the stars, the farthest any humans have been. I mean, I can't even express just how I feel and the goosebumps I have. And I would say that for all the kids out there, I mean, just pursue the dreams. I can't say any better than the crews. I tell my kids also, pursue what you're passionate about. And my passion is a space program. My passion is NASA. And I was able to accomplish that today, and hopefully many more days going forward, but you have opportunity to do what you are passionate about. And hopefully those kids who are in love with human spaceflight, in love with going to the stars, will be inspired by us, especially by our crews, and come join NASA, come work for us. We got a lot of missions ahead.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. Ariel Multzatsos from Televisa Univision. The only mission until today that for which the communications blackout lasted 6 minutes was Apollo 13, if I am not mistaken. Today's lasted 6 minutes, around 6 minutes. Does that say anything about the design of the ship, or what is the reason behind that? And also, very quickly, can we see a Hispanic in one of the next missions of Artemis? Thank you very much.
As far as the duration of the blackout, a lot of that, that's just dictated by the physics of the approach trajectory. You know, the Orion spacecraft, when you get enveloped by, plasma that's thousands of degrees, the radio frequency of the antennas just can't shoot through that. On the space shuttle, we were lucky we had the tail, and we had an antenna up on the tail, and it took us a while to figure that out, that was a way to keep calm. For Orion, it was 6 minutes, but it was predicted, and it played out exactly as we predicted, so that just gave us confidence that it was flying the way it was supposed to.
Will.
Hi, thank you. Will Robinson Smith with Spaceflight Now, and congratulations again tonight. A question for Rick. The whole flight operations team has been exceedingly busy throughout the course of this mission, in preparation for this mission. I imagine there will be a little bit of breathing room now that the crew is back safely on Earth, but when do you kind of get the band back together to start prepping for Artemis 3, and will it be the same complement of flight directors that we saw for Artemis 2? Thank you.
Well, you're right that the next mission is right around the corner, and we'll take the lessons learned from Artemis 2. We learned a bunch on how to fly people in space, both from a vehicle operations, but also from how to run a control room with a deep space mission. And when the time is right, we'll get back into flight-specific training. And we've got a core group of about 30 flight directors, and they're all extremely capable. And I think anybody who's assigned to that next mission is going to be as successful as the three of us, myself, Judd, and Jeff.
Yes, we'll take you.
Tom Clark with Sky News. Congratulations on a very successful mission. Amit, you spoke yesterday of there only being irrational fears. I wonder if you succumbed to any, and if so, what they were. But more after such a successful test flight, how much of a boost is this to NASA's confidence in its wider mission to stay on the moon?
I mean, for the campaign, this is a huge step. For us to build confidence, not just in our understanding of how this machine performs, but just that this organization can rise to the standard of qualifying a vehicle like this for crewed flight. I think that's huge. It took a lot of discipline and a lot of changes between Artemis 1 and now to get there, and the team really rose to the equation. These folks here, they did a tremendous job of instilling the amount of discipline and rigor and belief in the qualification standards to make sure this is going to work. And so to me, that was almost the biggest objective of this mission, was to prove to ourselves that we could move to crewed flight, but maintain the same level of risk knowledge and understanding, but also really focus on what that looks like. To your point, it is when you fly the crew, when you fly any crew, you can be paralyzed. You can almost be paralyzed by risk, because you become so close to them. You understand what's at stake when you with the families. You understand what's at stake. But the crew knows this, and we have to do it too. But organizationally, understand that what we do is we take calculated risks, and that it's going to take risks to explore. But you have to make sure you find the right line between being paralyzed by it and being able to manage it and bound it the right way.
Okay, Andrea. And then after that, we'll come to Michael, and then take Cyril on the phone.
Andrea Leinfelder of the Houston Chronicle. This question's for Rick. I enjoyed seeing the flight controllers storm into a white flight control room, and I was just wondering, were those the controllers from the back room? Were there people who were off duty who just couldn't be away? And why was it important to open the room to them and to let more of the Houston workforce celebrate that moment? Thanks.
That was anybody, I made a call out to anybody who had worked the mission, no matter what shift or what room you were sitting in, to come into the room and just soak in the moment with the rest of the operations team. They all deserved it. They worked tremendously hard, both pre-flight and during the mission, and it was a time for us to celebrate together before celebrating outside of that room.
Okay, Michael.
Hi, Michael Atkinson, Houston Public Media. Congratulations again. My question is also for Rick. I think that we've asked the crew several times if they felt the weight of this moment, and I'm curious if you felt, or if your other flight directors felt the weight of this, that as you were going through this, you're like, this is what Gene Kranz felt, this is what Chris Kraft felt. Did you ever feel that moment?
There were a couple of times where you have a lull in the shift, and you can kind of sit back in your seat and just look out the window. I do that at ISS a lot when I work down the hall working in Ficker 1. You just enjoy the view. As I worked early in the mission on the planning shift, the moon was getting bigger and bigger, and it was fun to just sit and watch the moon get bigger. And then as we worked on the entry -1 day shift yesterday, and then on the entry shift, it was fun to watch the Earth get bigger. And it was fascinating to watch orbital mechanics take over. And in the last day when I took the console, I think we were, earlier this morning, I think we were over 50,000 miles away from Earth, and we made up that last 50,000 miles in the last 8 hours. And it's a fun job to do.
All right, we'll take several questions from the phone. We have Anthony Leone with Spectrum News.
Hello, it's Anthony Leone with Spectrum News. Thank you so much for taking our questions. This is certainly a historic moment. NASA has kicked off the return of humans visiting the moon. How does it feel to write this new chapter in our history book?
I have to tell you, my background is in planetary science, and I was an active planetary scientist for a couple of decades, and I had this incredible honor to come over and work with the human spaceflight side of NASA and the team that have put this together. But as someone who has been interested in what we can do in exploring the moon and going beyond low Earth orbit, I think the weight of this mission and just how incredibly impactful it is that we have actually achieved this. During our lifetimes here, we have done this, right? Apollo was when I was a child, and to be here now and say we actually did this, we've gone back and we're going to go build a moon base. We are going to have an enduring presence on the moon. Just incredibly powerful.
The next question is from Manuel Masanti with Exploración Espacial.
Thank you so much. Congratulations to everyone. Manuel Masanti with Exploración Espacial. NASA showed one more time that space is a unifying force around the world, with a crew that connected so well with people that doesn't matter which country. How important was, for anyone in the panel, how important was this mission for the agency and for the future of the Artemis program?
It's the most important human spaceflight mission I think we've done in many decades, in terms of what it meant historically, but also what it means for the future of the agency. We talked before about, for many folks, this is the end of a long journey working on these machines, and for a lot of our workforce, it's just the beginning. But it is definitely an inflection point for all of us. So it's hard to understate, just how incredibly valuable it is to the entire team.
Let's go here to Zach.
Yes, thank you. Congratulations. Zachary Albert with the Launchpad from Canada. Ahmed, if you could send a message to NASA in 50 years. We've taken a lot looking back at the last 50. What would you say to the administration and the NASA then, when hopefully we've become a multiplanetary species? And for each of you, is there a word or a quick phrase on how you hope the history books classify this mission that started us going back?
It's a couple weeks ago, I was with the administrator. We were doing a different event, and we were talking about how we were really going to make choices and 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 change our focus towards the moon, towards building a moon base, towards doing incredible things again. And right before he and I walked up on stage, he turned to me and he said, at some point, people are going to look back at what we were doing, and we're going to be like those guys that were hogging out logs to cross lakes just to see if we could do it. And then, in the future, people are going to look back at us and go, wasn't that quaint, and isn't that interesting how they did that? But I mean, that's kind of where I think this is going to land in the grand scheme of things. We of course, Apollo achieved amazing things. We've done amazing things since then, but this, I think, is going to be an important step, and hopefully history is kind to us as a result.
Okay, Stephen, did you have one? TJ?
TJ Musco with the Epoch Times. Thank you all so much, and congratulations again. My question is about the two backups. They've trained for this mission themselves all the way. I'm not trying to ask if they're going to be trying to get you to tell me if there are Artemis 3 or not, but can you tell me a little bit more about their fate? Because during Apollo, it seemed that the backup crew of one mission was slated to be the prime crew of a later mission.
So both Jenny and Andre were part of this crew in every way. They trained with them. They were in the White Room when they were closing it out. They were with them. The families were together. Jenny was with us in the viewing room today. So they're part of this crew, and I'll leave it at that.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Allison McGraw from Mysterious Meteorites. Given the crew's successful demonstration of the 4K video stream with the laser comms, will there be another test of this? And what does this mean for TRL readiness level for, say, a planetary spacecraft mission? Thank you.
You got it.
I think we've had an incredible demonstration of the optical communications and the 4K video streaming that was just fantastic. I think we've really shown that this is an amazing capability that we'd certainly like to implement in the future. So we'll have to see how that works and see how we can make that happen.
Just to point out, though, we have actually closed an optical link for much further
Yes, we
away
have, from
on the
Mars.
Psyche vehicle. So,
Yep.
So we're working on that.
Mars distance. Mm-hmm.
Okay, we'll come around here. Just need to wait for the mic to make its way over.
Hi, thank you again for doing this, and again, congrats on just such an amazing mission. Beverly Casillas for Space Scout here. And I just had a quick question. We've seen some really incredible imagery throughout the course of this mission. It's been great, to get that downlinked quickly with the laser comms. And I'm curious how much of that imagery that was taken during the mission on board has been downlinked, and how much of that still remains on the spacecraft to be recovered later. Thank you.
I don't happen to know the official stats, but we can certainly follow up with you at a later date.
I do know that Reed had made the comment that even though they sent back quite a bit, that the stuff they have with them is pretty amazing. So once we get it off the physical media on the vehicle, hopefully we'll be able to get it to you guys soon.
Yeah, we'll get all those SD cards. We'll get them all downloaded. And of course, all of the imaging that was required on Monday, that was the science imaging, all of that will be made available through the planetary data system and archived.
Okay, we'll take a few more from the phone. Next is Alejandro Turnbull with Space Scout.
Hi, congratulations everyone on a fantastic mission. Question for Rick. As the spacecraft was descending under parachute, we saw on the infrared camera some plumes emanating from the vehicle that looked like either venting or thruster firing. Just wondering if you could speak a little to what the spacecraft was doing then, what exactly caused those plumes. Thank you.
Yeah, not knowing the video that you're referring to, I would imagine that's probably the spacecraft reorienting itself. When we're on our main parachutes, we do a reorientation to ensure that the most robust structural portion of the spacecraft contacts the water first. And so I suspect the plumes you were seeing were the crew module reaction control system thrusters firing.
The next question is from David Denault with About Space Today News.
First, I'd like to say just not congratulations, but I think this is just one of the most spectacular missions NASA has ever accomplished. And a lot of people have compared this to Apollo 8. And I can tell you there is no comparison to what has been done with the Orion spacecraft and the technology from our European Space Agency partners. I was there from the beginning of Apollo 8. I'm probably the oldest broadcast journalist today. But my question to each of you, what was your wow moment?
Start with Mr. Quinn. You're kind of lonely over there.
I didn't hear the question. Yep.
Just pick an awesome thing.
An awesome moment.
Well, being a guy from the Kennedy Space Center, the launch was a pretty special day. You know, to see all those umbilicals clear the vehicle and the vehicle clear the tower, and have that rocket rise off the pad was absolutely amazing.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
All right. I know Victor always says touchdown, getting onto the water. You know, for me, the greatest moment was the parachutes, the main chutes deploying. I think seeing that, I was chanting "Go, go, go" by myself. Somebody shot a video of that. I think I was going crazy, but I just kept saying that as the drogues came out. But when the mains came out and they started slowly inflating, I mean, that was just a tremendous moment. You know, like I said, objective number one is get the crew home. And I know there's all kinds of things that can happen after that, but having those mains and getting the vehicle to 16 miles per hour from 24,600 miles per hour is pretty amazing. And getting those chutes down was a great moment.
I'm going to vote for the naming of the two craters as my top moment.
I know it's all still fresh, so for me, I'm probably going to say two things. When the crew, you know, when Reed reported back, you know, 4 crew green after splashdown, that's what we hope for, right? So that was pretty awesome. And then when they started, we saw Christina come out of the capsule. Then I was like, okay, we're here.
Okay, we'll take, oh, sorry, I'm at.
No, it's okay. Mine's easy. It'll be tomorrow when I see my friends again.
All right, one more from the phone and then back into the room. So the phone question will come from Russell Pounds from Pacific Rim Media.
Hi, this is Russell calling from Alaska today. Congratulations to all. And I'll tell you, there were tears of joy in the room here where we were watching. My question is about logistics. I'm thinking about all of the moving parts it takes to bring food, power, telecom, and so forth on a complicated mission. What were some of the logistics lessons learned that might be useful to organizations back here on Earth?
Interesting.
Yeah, I think a good start. I mean, it's incredibly challenging to get to plan for a mission like this. You know, even though Orion's a pretty big spacecraft, making sure we have everything we need. And we think we count through contingencies. We lose systems sometimes. We worry about that. We want to make sure we have everything ready to go. I will tell you though that just having thought about this for a while, the logistics of flying a 10-day mission, even this far away, pales in comparison to the logistics of keeping crew on space station constantly going. So I would say that a lot of our logistics learnings have been derived from that. That's not just consumables and water and gas, et cetera, but it's also thinking about the reliability of the systems and when they're going to fail. It's hard to predict sometimes, how to do that, sparing the machine and making sure we have everything pre-positioned in the event that we have failures. That comes from a lot of learning, both pre-flight and in-flight. And so, but in-space logistics is going to be a huge challenge for us going forward as we really contemplate a moon base, but hopefully we'll be able to feed forward, lessons from obviously this mission, but I think from Space Station Together as we build that moon base.
Okay, we'll take a few more here in the room. We'll go in the middle there.
Hi, Jishnu Nair, Houston Business Journal, echoing congratulations on a great mission. While we were following along, we had a lot of voices from the space industry, especially here in Houston, kind of chime in and express their support and as well. And I know that a lot of those companies are working on specific NASA proposals or submissions. But in general, how would you say you'd like to see the industry kind of respond to the kind of achievement that NASA has done here and hopes to continue with Artemis?
I'll take the first stab on that one. How I'd like to see industry respond is to take this as not just the inspiration, but the challenge. You've heard that we really want to speed up our cadence and be able to return our crew back to space within a year and to the surface of the moon in 2 years. In fact, hopefully land on the moon twice in 2028. In order to do that, we're not going to be able to do that alone. We need all of industry to work and come along with us, and they need to accept that challenge and come with us and really start the production lines that are going to be required in order to achieve that goal.
Okay, let's hear in the white hat.
Hi, JJ Love with Tech Talk Media. I just have some words of recognition for you all and the entire Artemis team. What you have done this week is remind the people of Earth that wonder is worth chasing, that curiosity is not a luxury, it is the most human thing we have. You didn't just test a spacecraft, you tested mankind's potential and carried all of us with you in the process. Every kid who looked up at the moon this week did it differently because of you. People who needed something to believe in found it in that splashdown tonight. So thank you, not just for the data, and not just for the mission, but for proving that the pursuit of what's possible is still alive and well. We are so grateful.
Thank you for that.
Very well said. Thank you for that. I would tell you that, for everybody listening, this is the taxpayers program. People paid for this. The people invested in this. They invested in all of the things that we do, and so we're grateful for the support.
Okay, we'll take a couple more questions, and then we'll go ahead and wrap. We have one here, and then further back.
Hello, congrats. Emily Martin from CID's Best Friends. Reed Wiseman addressed a shout out to the ESM right after it separated from Orion, saying that it powered their journey on the moon with perfection. I was wondering what comments you might have on the performances of the ESM and on the future of that collaboration with Europe.
Yeah, I would say that the European service module in general performed as expected. I know we learned a little bit about the pressurization system, and we'll work on that. But overall, really great part of our spacecraft. Really appreciate our European partnership. We do have continued partnership with them for Artemis 3, 4. We're building ESM 5 as well, and we'll continue to do that as we move forward.
All right, we'll take one final question.
Hi there, Chelsea Torres with Fox. Again, congratulations on a historic mission. Again, test flight, and one thing that we are as humans are explorers. And so I'm curious if you're able to kind of talk about this. During the lunar flyby, we saw the excitement not just from the crew, but also from everyone in mission control. Was there anything that kind of stood out to you, whether it was the Terminator, the certain pictures and data, anything at all that you can speak to that maybe you didn't know before about the lunar surface, our planet, space itself, that you'd like to speak about? Thank you.
I'm just going to call out the one thing that I thought was truly unique about this mission. I mean, certainly there's a ton of new things that we've done with having our crew observe far side of the moon and being able to observe these features after their incredible training. But I'll tell you, the one thing that really stands out to me is being able to watch our crew observe an eclipse. By having the moon passing between their spacecraft and the sun. That was a totally unique experience and something that I was so proud that we could all participate and travel along with them and experience that moment.
All right, that's all the time we have today. Thank you very much to our participants today and to all of you for following along. You can find the latest information about our missions on nasa.gov, and hopefully soon information about the expected arrival time of the crew back in Houston tomorrow. Thank you.
And reaction from across the aisle following the successful return of Artemis II astronauts. President Trump wrote on Truth Social, quote, "Congratulations to the great and very talented crew of Artemis II. The entire trip was spectacular. The landing was perfect, and as President of the United States, I could not be more proud. I look forward to seeing you all at the White House soon. We'll be doing it again, and then, next step, Mars." President Donald J. Trump. California Democrat Scott Peters, whose district includes much of the San Diego coast where the astronauts landed, also weighing in. He says, "Welcome home, Artemis II crew. San Diego may not be quite as cool as the moon, but we're glad you made it back safe, and we look forward to hearing more about your historic mission." C-SPAN's Washington Journal, our live forum inviting you to discuss the latest issues in government, politics, and public policy, from Washington, D.C. to across the country. Coming up Saturday morning, Aaron David Miller of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace will talk about the U.S.-Iran ceasefire and peace talks taking place in Islamabad, Pakistan. And then retired Major General Stephen Lepper on the right to free speech among current and former military and the Uniform Code of Military Justice. And J.D. Hayworth of the Pharmaceutical Reform Alliance will talk about a new report on U.S. drug pricing and the Trump administration's efforts to reduce costs. C-SPAN's Washington Journal. Join the conversation live at 7 Eastern Saturday morning on C-SPAN, C-SPAN Now, our free mobile app, or online at cspan.org. Saturday is the last day of the annual National Action Network Convention in New York City. At 11 a.m. Eastern, the organization's founder, the Reverend Al Pharmaceutical Reform Alliance, will talk about a new report on U.S. drug pricing and the Trump administration's efforts to reduce costs. C-SPAN's Washington Journal. Join the conversation live at 7 Eastern Saturday morning